Was awesome. I went to the casino, which was really dangerous. My wife sees all our transactions, so I've taken a side job here at the hotel, cleaning rooms. They do every 4-day cleanings here, so now they're doing every other day because I'm stepping it up. Okay, so, but thanks to Undertone for a great dinner and to Taboola for kicking things off with the cocktails. It was great. It was a little hard to hear them, so if you have a chance, if you see those folks from those organizations, say hi and thank them because it was kind of raucous there last night. But we didn't know there was going to be a live band, actually. That was kind of a surprise. But it was a lot of fun, so we really appreciate their support and making that happen. Okay, so to kick things off today, we have Jay Wardle. Jay Wardle's the president of Dstillery. And Jay, I think, is going to be talking about a cookieless future and how to deal with that. But I'm going to have the expert come up and tell you a little bit more. Warm welcome for Jay. Jay?
Oh, there we go. Can everybody hear me okay? So it's good to see everybody. I think I think it's especially good to see people because a lot of people here are from the East Coast, and it's like it's like noon on the East Coast, so I guess early times are not so difficult. But I'd like to start today with, I'll say like an observation and then some gratitude. And the observation is, I've worked in a lot of industries, and I think we're so fortunate and blessed to work in this industry because there's so many good, smart people here. I think that we've learned to live over Zoom and we've done the video thing, but I just don't think they're like the serendipitous connections and personal relationships that you create like you do in an environment, an event like this, provided to us by Media Post. I mean, like meeting Kim and Christine and, like Nish and I have kind of a connection from way back, in our past lives and all that stuff. And that stuff I just don't think would serendipitously happen on Zoom. And so I give my gratitude is to the organizer because I think it takes a lot of courage to still work with all of the uncertainty and the travel restrictions and the moving regulations and requirements to actually pull something like this off, to get a bunch of people who are really smart and really talented and just good human beings in a room over a few days like this, traveling across borders across the United States. So thank you, Media Post. And thank you everybody that I guess has taken a couple minutes to get to know me and Patty from Dstillery as well over the last couple of days. So I'm going to keep this kind of fairly lightweight, and I'll probably zigzag around a little bit. I will say I changed this presentation from where I started based on observing Kim's and some of the other really great presentations because I said this thing's way too salesy and it's way too pitchy, and I hate doing all of that. So I just want to kind of share some observations and some developments, and obviously there's some embedded, self-serving kind of promotional distillery stuff in there, but that's not really what I want to be the takeaway. I really want the takeaway to be like, how do we kind of look up from our keyboards and our screens and look a little further into the future and really start thinking and preparing for a very different environment in the future than we're currently operating in today. So a little bit about Dstillery because we just have to do this as a presenting sponsor. We provide targeting solutions to programmatic advertising. We've been doing that for the better part of a decade and a half. Fairly high scale, fairly high performance. Big client base and a lot of brands and agencies that use us. We take our data science acumen very, very seriously. I can't remember who mentioned, I think it was Kelly from Kinesso yesterday, mentioned following someone on LinkedIn. Melinda Hahn-Williams, who's our chief data scientist, she doesn't promote Dstillery, but she talks about a lot of stuff that I think is very thoughtful and actionable and provocative relative to programmatic advertising, AI, machine learning, and modeling. And I would welcome you to kind of check her out on LinkedIn because I think that she's a pretty good thought leader in what's happening and what could be to come. And she leads our data science focus and area at Dstillery. We build custom predictive models that deliver performance today into the future. Soundbite, sales pitch, I'll leave it at that. So I don't want to get too much into kind of product stuff, but we have two products. One is an ID-based, kind of cookie-based behavioral targeting solution. It's got a big roster of clients. About 500 agencies and 1,500 to 2,000 brands use that targeting solution on a monthly basis, from like the Fortune 100 to small to mid-market to medium-sized brands and agencies kind of across the United States. So it's a fairly scaled, high-performance, high-volume targeting solution available on media activation platforms, that just about everybody uses. We're going to talk a little bit more about ID-free custom AI, which is our kind of post-cookie ID-free solution today. Not too much diving into like how it's built and how it models and all of that, but just the answer it's trying to the question it's trying to answer for a lot of us in this room who are kind of heavy programmatic participants and buyers of targeting solutions. So this is kind of like the no-duh opening slide here. In the digital ad industry in transition, advertisers need new strategies to find audiences. Yeah, no duh, that's why we're talking here. We're talking about like alternative IDs, we're talking about like, post-cookie solutions, we're talking about contextual this time around. But it's changing, and it's changing faster than I think any of us are probably, keeping pace with right now. And I think that the change is going to have a fairly seismic shift. Whether or not Google truly does retire and deprecate cookies, this is kind of widen the aperture to look at a lot of solutions and a lot of ways to reach and engage and motivate buyers and consumers in different ways based on a lot of the press and the privacy regulation that's taking place in the market today. So we'll dive a little bit deeper. This is really, we don't use this in kind of pitch decks, but this is just kind of a framing slide that we oftentimes use. Behavioral targeting works because the availability of so much data. First-party data, third-party data, location data, demographic data. I mean, all these things kind of get stitched together to really provide a very fine-grained look at consumer behaviors and journeys. And we're going to be faced with this question, and we are faced with this question right now: how do you find a receptive consumer without any data about them? Let's all assume that we live in a future where data minimization is actually the norm, not kind of data maximization. And it's not going to be big data, but it's actually going to be kind of less and more privacy by design data, and more people are going to opt out of this stuff. So I think that agencies need to kind of lead their brands, and brands need to just be taking this question at face value. With less data, with more privacy by design, with more regulation, how are we going to reach and find and engage and maintain relationships with the people that are meaningful to our business? So our perspective, and I think a perspective that's gaining some traction in the market, is like shift the focus from the person to the moment. Because that's always been the promise of programmatic advertising, right? Right person, right place, right time, right message, et cetera. So this is an insert kind of sales pitch slide here, but the only thing I really want to draw your attention to is this first one, the future-proof one. Like reach 100% of browsers, drive performance today and into the future. You're going to hear this term a lot, future-proof, and we use it as well. It's in this deck. This is my belief. I think that a lot of us are confusing education with preparation. In second half of last year, people didn't really even understand the naming conventions, much less the value proposition of a lot of products that were being introduced to the market. Now, brands and agencies are getting more educated about what the toolkit could look like, but in our experience, they're not moving fast enough to actually prepare, test, and learn to be able to take something from trial to production. And so this concept of future-proofing, I think time is not limitless, it's finite, and the clock is really starting to pick up the pace here. So I would just encourage everybody, get into testing as quickly as possible. Test against whatever the current measurement standards are, start to try to understand and influence what the future measurement standards are, but I think we all have a big reliance on third-party cookies and behavioral data, and that's going to not be as widely available in the future as it is today. So we've been in market for the better part of a year and a half with an ID-free post-cookie solution, largely using a lot of the same modeling and data science acumen we've built up over a decade and a half. And our experience is it actually works, and it works pretty well, and it works at scale, and it works to provide incrementality and performance to cookie-based solution. And and the other thing we kind of put in this bucket is contextual. The things that buyers are looking at as alternatives to current cookie-based solutions by way of alt IDs and ID-free solutions like contextual. So we've seen performance at scale across a number of categories, including e-commerce, B2B, and financial services, where the efficiency and the performance is not only better than contextual, it's actually on par and better than even best-in-class cookie-based solutions today, which was a real eye-opener for us, which I think is super cool, because I think we want, let's assume that most advertising is digital advertising. most digital advertising is programmatic advertising, and almost all of programmatic advertising is powered by targeting. So, and that's been developed over so much time to be able to introduce something into market that can perform on par with kind of best-in-class cookie-based solutions today is not only encouraging, I think exciting about the opportunity to use what's available today, and in some form will be available in the future by way of alt IDs, and then to actually kind of broaden the scope and reach and impact into areas where people have opted out of tracking and targeting. So how can we target without user IDs? So this is a retread from earlier, shift the focus from the person to the moment. So what does that really mean? These are probably the slides that I would implore you to maybe remember, as you're gonna see a lot of content today. In my experience and in my opinion, most behavioral targeting is observing a journey and then identifying someone else that's on that same journey and saying, hey, someone who's kind of gone down this footpath and taken this action, we're able to sift through the data and find someone else who's on that same journey, and we believe we could influence that same action. Now, I think the reality in a post-cookie, kind of an ID-free world is there's gonna be a lot of different journeys that could land at that same action or at that same opportunity. And that's really the difference, I would say, between the ID-based and the ID-free opportunity is that, we've looked and said, hey, someone who probably looks and has behavior like Jay, who's gone along this path, has taken this action before, so let's put an ad in front of them to try to influence that outcome. But the ID-free testing, when post-cookie testing and the solution that we've built, what it's taught us is that there's so many different journeys that someone can take and potentially arrive at a moment where they could be influenced to take an action that's valuable or meaningful to a brand. And so, how do we do that? We have something that's called Map of the Internet. It's kind of a data science, AI, machine learning kind of, programmatic kind of jargon, sciencey, terminology insert here that allows us to take, non-cookie based data and understand hundreds of millions of digital journeys across the internet, and from that build an understanding of the correlations, the likelihood or the lack of likelihood across ad impressions, websites, time of day, geos, et cetera. And in doing that, we're able to kind of map this all out to be able to say that your brand and your first party data wants to drive this action, and the journey that led there is this. We're able to identify all of these other digital journeys that avail many, many, many more ad impression opportunities to us to say, put an ad here, targeting without tracking, and you have a high likelihood of being able to drive an outcome based on your first party data. And that's very similar to how ID-based targeting kind of works today, right? You look at a lot of data, you try to understand the patterns in order to make predictions. So where we've taken the methodology is take that from kind of a very cookie dependent thing into kind of more of an inventory and ad impression thing, and be able to action and decide and put ads in front of people that are meaningful to brands. I put this slide in this morning to actually curb my own narrative. For the benefit of the conference attendees, I've removed a bunch of salesies, pitchies, how it's built, and works stuff. And I just want to zoom out before I kind of turn this over. Obviously, I'm not going to give you kind of the distillery sales pitch here. I just want you to think about preparation, understanding utilization of the tools, and not only as a backstop to the deprecation of cookies, but as an opportunity to really innovate and revolutionize your targeting and programmatic practices. So this is how we look at, as an oversimplification, the post-cookie options for targeting new customers. Solutions that reach users have opted in for user tracking. Those are still going to be available to be able to reach at whatever scale and whatever balance in the future. UID2, RAMP ID, other opt-in IDs. I think there's always going to be a portion and a value to that solution. We do believe that there will be a much greater portion of the digital advertising ecosystem who are going to be users that have opted to not share their personal information and who don't want to be targeted with tracking. So we've heard, I think, Sybids, Chalice is another one, Cognitive that talked about kind of bidding algorithms. These kind of ID-free, Topics AI, formerly Phlox, publisher things, contextual, I don't think that this should be a binary decision. I don't think that anybody in this room or any brand or agency on earth should say that, like, I'm putting all my eggs in that basket, because that's counter to how digital advertising and programmatic has grown and worked. It's about understanding the portfolio of tools to reach the right consumers at the right moment, at the right time, to drive the right action, and then finding the balance across those things that are actually going to allow you to allocate and optimize accordingly to get where your business needs to be. Every targeting toolbox needs solutions from both buckets. I wouldn't encourage anybody in this room or in this ecosystem to be kind of forced by the sell side or their own organizations to force themselves into one of these buckets versus both. Come on, man. Oh. So we just ask our partners this, like, how will ID-Free help your campaigns today? Because I don't think necessarily the adoption and the preparation of these tools should be like a July 2023 thing, a Q4 2023 thing. Some brands and forward-thinking marketers, they actually they're targeting beyond IDs today. So you know what? This is like, get the entire web, get Safari, get Chrome, get the entirety of the targetable opportunity, and use this as a complementary or an incremental solution to do that today. Now, there are a lot of not yets, and they're waiting for someone else to maybe figure something out, or some magic arrow to end up in their quiver. I would say that testing and learning should happen as quickly as possible. Not any solution. Test and learn and put as much budget as you can against these things so that you can have the confidence in the processes and the value and the ultimately kind of production scale requirement that you're going to have to satisfy and fulfill your kind of large and programmatic budgets. And a lot of these solutions will not only provide incremental scale, but be able to help and identify and find users that can increase scale and maintain or even better performance today. So I hope that wasn't too salesy. I hope that it wasn't too pitchy. I hope that you kind of think maybe Dstillery knows what we're talking about. We might have something to share, but I wouldn't understand that anybody really understands what the value or the sales proposition of our solution is. But I do want to evangelize that I just think we shouldn't confuse education with preparedness, and we have to lead preparing our organizations for what targeting in balance with privacy and regulation and performance and scale are going to look like in the future. And I think that's why everybody came here, so that they can just be thought-provoked and have their curiosity tickled, so that we can go back and do the things that we need to do every day, but ultimately, start putting ourselves in a position to have confidence that we're going to be able to meet and exceed the needs of not only consumers, but the brands that we're ultimately in service of as well. So I put this thing together in like a day. I'm sorry, Media Post, that it kind of took me so long to get you the materials. You can blame Kim for that. I saw the deck that I had, and I thought it was subpar. But if anybody has any questions or feedback on kind of what we've talked about, I would welcome you approaching me or Patty Boyle. Patty, if you could stand up. And with that, I will now, turn over the mic and just thank you all for kicking off your beautiful Scottsdale morning with me.